In this episode, we're going to take a deeper dive into how the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, or RDOF, works and how it might be improved to ensure more effective funding of nationwide broadband infrastructure. For a quick overview of the RDOF auctions, please find a link in the description to episode 1 in this series. Now, let's get straight into it. The first issues with the RDOF auction process occur in its earliest stages, namely with the qualifications, or lack thereof, of prospective bidders and their ability to elbow out more qualified bidders. Specifically, in the first phase of the RDOF auctions, many of the auction winners have never deployed fiber networks, yet they've been awarded federal funding to do exactly that. The problem with this is that the bids submitted by these first-time providers are artificially low in some cases. That is to say, the job will likely cost more than the bidders anticipate, or worse, the inexperience of the auction winners will lead to the job not being completed. Some of these concerns are already manifesting in reality, as one auction winner, whom we'll call Company A, has rescinded their winning bids ex post facto, stating that they couldn't meet the standards of the auction, and thus leaving in limbo the territories they intended to serve. While this candid resignation is appreciated for its honesty, as a matter of getting broadband to communities that lack it, this merely serves as another delay that seemingly should have been avoided from the outset through more rigorous auction protocols. As of the writing of this script, it is not yet clear how funding will be dispersed to serve these territories. Another company, whom we'll refer to as Company B, which recently emerged from bankruptcy, was awarded $370.9 million in 8 states, in nearly $250 million in West Virginia alone in Phase 1. This didn't go unnoticed, as West Virginia Senator Shelley Moore Capito wrote a letter to the FCC stating her concerns that Company B would be able to address the needs of her constituents. An excerpt from Senator Capito's letter reads as follows: I urge the FCC to reject their, meaning Company B's, long-form application. The stakes are simply too high to provide nearly $250 million to a company that does not have the capability to deliver on the commitments made to the FCC. West Virginia cannot afford to be let down, yet again, by the failure of Company B to deliver on promises made to federal partners. She further went on to state, I am concerned they lack the technological capabilities in West Virginia to transition from a provider that struggles to deliver the FCC minimum standard of 25 by 3 megabits to a provider that is able to provide gigabit level service to 95% of the required number of locations in the state. Finally, she drew attention to the concern that Company B wouldn't be able to finance this project, stating, I urge you to closely scrutinize the financial capability of Company B to finance these investments, particularly as they emerge from a Chapter 11 financial restructuring. Because of the nature of a reverse auction, it is entirely possible, if not likely, that a bidder will be required to invest their own funds to cover costs above and beyond the subsidy provided by RDOF. Emerging from a financial restructuring requires significant private capital, and I am concerned about the ability of Company B to raise sufficient capital to both complete their financial restructuring and fund the construction of a network that will deliver the required gigabit level service in the locations they successfully bid in the RDOF auction. The expense of constructing a network capable of delivering gigabit service is an expensive and daunting feat for a company in a strong financial position, let alone one that is in financial turmoil. The full letter offers even more details and is well worth a read, as Senator Capito outlines many of the issues discussed here. A link to the letter is contained in the description. Moving on, it's important to remember that these problems could have been avoided from the beginning, with more robust requirements for prospective bidders. The RDOF shouldn't be an experimental program. Rather, it should be a vehicle to supply the means to deploy broadband to tried and true providers. To this end, one way that this problem could be addressed moving forward is for any prospective bidders to certify that they have already provided broadband service meeting or exceeding the standards by which they intend to receive federal funding. In other words, if a company seeks to receive funding to deploy broadband at 100 megabits download speed, they should offer proof that they have already done so elsewhere. As such, the RDOF auction would not enable hopeful participants who may or may not succeed, but rather it would be used as an engine to offer means to those providers who have already proven they can get the job done. In the end, this is clearly the best solution for communities that sorely need access to high-speed internet and can't afford to bank on untested carriers to succeed in their first attempt at the task. Naturally, in auction areas where no such experienced providers have submitted bids, more lenience may be exercised. However, in Phase 1 of the auction, many experienced providers lost to newcomers with no track record of service in the states they intend to serve, nor at the speeds they promised. To the uninitiated, this may not seem like a major hurdle. However, different states bring with them different regulatory and competitive environments, as well as different topography, which presents challenges in and of itself.
One company was in 5 states and they expanded to 15. That means pretty much by definition, they did not have facilities in 10 of those states. So when you're going from 1 state to 5 states or 1 state to 12 states or whatever, you don't have facilities in those areas. You don't have knowledge of those areas. You don't have experience in those areas. And they're assuming what the economics are going to look like in areas that they have absolutely no experience in. And that I find problematic.
An extreme example of this issue is illustrated by the largest auction winner of Phase 1, whom we'll refer to as Company C. Some excerpts from the Minnesota Telecom Alliance's petition to deny encapsulate the problems quite well. Quote, "Put simply, there is no indication that Company C has the technical, engineering, financial, operational, management, staff, or other resources to meet RDOF build-out and service obligations with respect to the 21,908 census blocks, or 114,921 locations, that it has won in Minnesota and Iowa. Furthermore, if Company C is not able to meet its build-out and service obligations for the RDOF 1 support that it has bid upon, over 100,000 rural Minnesota locations and almost 13,000 rural Iowa locations, not to mention over 400,000 locations in 13 other states, will be deprived of urgently needed high-speed broadband access for years. As recently as February 25th, 2019, Company C requested and was later granted a waiver of the CAF Phase 2 auction deadline for filing audited financial statements on the grounds that it was a small business with a limited number of employees and administrative resources, that it was not audited in the ordinary course of business, and that its efforts to retain and engage accountants within the required timeframe were unsuccessful. The MTA continues in their filing, stating that, quote, "There is no indication that Company C has grown during the last 19 to 24 months from a company that was A, too small to have audited financial statements or even to rapidly retain a qualified accounting firm to conduct such an audit, to B, an entity that is now able to engineer, construct, and operate fiber to the home or other predominantly fiber optic networks to serve over 500,000 locations in scattered areas of 15 states." In the same CAF Phase 2 auction, Company C won limited amounts of support in 5 states, Minnesota, Iowa, Illinois, Nebraska, and Nevada, but defaulted in 2 of them, Nebraska and Nevada. As a result of this, Company C was fined $3,563 by the Enforcement Bureau. Finally, in summarizing the issue of bidders, such as Company C, weeding out more realistic, capable bidders early in the process, the MTA writes, quote, "If an entity were allowed to propose gigabit service, bid support levels down to unreasonably low levels to force out bona fide gigabit service providers, and then be allowed to avoid the consequences of its bid strategy by switching to a lower speed service or different technology, it would not only be cheating the bona fide gigabit bidders, but also be depriving thousands of households of high-speed broadband service that they otherwise could have had. It's important to note that the purpose of this video is not to target any one funding recipient in particular. In Company C's case, the magnifying glass is applied simply because they were the top awardee from the Phase 1 auctions, and their track record is less than exemplary. I'd also like to state that during the course of writing this script, more developments have taken place, wherein Company C was forced to relinquish funding in certain areas due to not proving eligibility. The heightened scrutiny provided in this video series is intended to reduce inefficiency in the auction process, particularly prior to the implementation of the second phase. Similar to the issue with unproven providers winning funding over more experienced competitors is the prevalence with which wireless internet service providers, or WISPs, were awarded money where other carriers hoped to provide fiber. Doug Dawson, president of CCG Consulting, described the problem with wireless companies winning auctions over fiber providers as follows, quote, "This means the FCC believes that fixed wireless technology is the functional equivalent of fiber, even though the underlying point-to-multipoint architecture can't be used to deliver giant bandwidth to more than a few customers, and it's not really designed to deliver gigabit download, and certainly not a symmetrical gigabit. The result? By allowing WISPs to claim gigabit capabilities, the FCC cheated huge numbers of people out of getting fiber."
Which means every customer would have to be within 500 feet of the antenna of the tower, and the tower would have to be fed by fiber. So if you can do it on a point-to-point basis, not point-to-multipoint, but point-to-point. So every user is going to have a dedicated antenna on the tower. That's the only way you can do point-to-point. So picture a 3-foot by 3-foot panel antenna for every single user. And the users have to be within 500 feet of that tower. The economics would just be crazy. We track the number of treble tickets that we have, of course, probably everybody else does too. And we track it by technology. Wireless is the number one treble ticket in terms of percent. So, fiber is the most stable, and fiber, whenever you get a fiber cut, that's a big deal, and that takes an all hands on deck. But the fiber network from point to point is by far the most stable and by far the least problematic. So, fiber's faster, everybody knows that, but it's less maintenance as well. On wireless, you do have far more trouble tickets because things happen. You've got an outdoor antenna for one, and the outdoor antenna is subject to all kinds of environmental concerns, and the transmission from the tower is also outdoor equipment that is subject to the whims of the environment. So you have a lot of things that can go wrong on wireless, and they do. So right. When you put it in, it's certainly not the last time you're going to be there. Certainly not.
The final major issue with the RDOF process that we'll explore here is that it's operating on bad mapping data. According to one study, the RDOF is, quote, poised to inadvertently direct funding to hundreds of thousands of locations that are already served, including wealthy urban areas that have some of the most connectivity in the country. Our goal of closing the digital divide will be hampered if we distribute scarce universal service funding to places that do not need support, like Fisherman's Wharf in San Francisco, downtown Chicago, or tech centers like the MIT campus and Apple headquarters.
I don't know that good data exists on a national scale. I think that there are a lot of holes in the data. I think the local companies know generally what is served and what is not served, but even the latest attempts to get better maps, they are better because they're not using entire census block groups. They're using census blocks, and they're using what are they calling them? Polygons. So you're actually drawing areas and saying whether or not these areas are served and the other areas are not served. There's an awful lot of work that has gone into that, and I think that the FCC will have good data at some point. I think the FCC has done a very good job of morphing their requests and the data to get something that is useful at the national level. It takes them a very long time to pull it together, but we all, as ILECs, as incumbent local exchange carriers, we all fill out what's called a 477. Now, the 477 is a form that tells exactly which customers we can serve and exactly how high of speed internet we can give them. So I think the FCC has done a good job of changing the requirements, and I believe they're on the right path to getting some very good maps. I don't know how long it's going to take them to put that all together, but I think they are on a pretty good path to do that. There's a huge inconsistency in terms of knowledge of broadband. So you have some places that are very familiar with it and are very actively engaged in helping, plug the digital divide, if you will. And you have others that are just now learning that they are responsible for broadband, and they're trying to figure out what broadband means. So it's everything from one to the other and everything in between. There are a lot of good agencies out there and organizations that are familiar with broadband and have experience and want to assist. However, at the same time, there are many that don't.
Furthermore, according to a joint filing made by various industry associations, there is concern that inadequately prepared RDOF winners may prevent legitimate providers from receiving funding from other local, state, and federal programs due to the areas already being, quote, served, unquote, by RDOF winners. This may result in a freeze of broadband deployment in the region, thus enhancing the digital divide. We certainly discussed many nuanced issues with the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund in this video. So, I'd like to wrap things up as succinctly as possible. In order to have the best chance at success in achieving national connectivity to the broadband network, federal funding should be targeted to companies who have proven track records of getting the job done. Where possible, wired infrastructure should be preferred over wireless, but in all cases, rigorous standards should be implemented by the FCC to ensure that underserved and unserved Americans receive access to broadband as quickly as possible. This is more important now than ever, as increasing numbers of Americans are working from home, as well as engaging in virtual schooling, telehealth, and many other remote activities. This concludes the second video in the series. Please find all source documents in the description below. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.